The kickoff schedules have been announced for Pacific, EMEA, and Americas. Not for China yet, but I don't know enough about China anyway to really give you any insight. But today what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at who's been screwed, who's got an easy path, and all of that. This won't necessarily be a pick'ems video. We'll do that closer to the time the tournament actually starts. But I do want to bring up some real issues that I think we might see during the kickoff tournament as well. First though, let me explain how we got to this point, because you may see that there are certain groups of death and certain easy paths that other teams have. So how did Riot actually work out? Well, doing some reverse engineering, we take a look at Pacific here. Obviously, we know that the top seeds, so your best performing team from champs, they got the bye. They were going into Group C, right? This was already known. But how did they do the rest of the teams? Well, as far as I can tell, what it is that the other two top performing teams from champs, so for Pacific, that would be T1 and DRX, they were also pot 1 teams, if you will, and they went into the 2 groups. There was then 3 pot 2 teams, and those teams were the team that was your 4th performing team at champs, so for instance Zeta Division in Pacific, your LCQ runner-up, which was Team Secret, and your LCQ 3rd place team, which was Gen G. And this follows for all of the 3 regions thus far, and then everyone else was put in pot 3 and just drawn to the different groups, the 5 remaining teams. So we ended up with this. Now let's quickly go through these different groups and see who got screwed. Well, Group A is interesting here in Pacific because we have, I would say, like 3 teams that you could reasonably make an argument that, they have a chance of winning this group depending on how it goes and how they perform. Sorry, GE, sorry, Indian fans, but you're not included in this. But for the other 3 teams, I think it's a bit up in the air. Like, oh, I wonder who will win this group, right? It could be close. It could be interesting, that first group. Group B, not nearly as interesting here for Pacific because we got the 2 worst performing teams from last year. Now, maybe Talon are a bit better than they were before. DRX basically have a bye as well in the first round here and should probably, even with the changes, be looking to, win this group and get straight to the playoffs. And Paper Rex, I mean, it didn't get the easiest draw in the world because I think that RRQ are a pretty good lower seed team, but they did also get Gen G, who are probably the weakest tier, pot 2 team that they could have got as well. So I think this is probably pretty good for RRQ, who will think that they can beat Gen G, but also Paper X should be feeling pretty confident that they can win as well. The thing is as well with these Group Cs, particularly for Fnatic and Paper X, of course, is you're likely just to see this matchup twice, which makes it kind of weird because then is it better to just lose the first game? If obviously the players and the pros aren't going to think that they're going to lose to Fnatic or Paper X, but if you lose the first game, it doesn't really matter because you're going to get more time to prep for probably the same opponent that you've just played than they will because they have to play a whole extra game, so they might be revealing more of their strats and stuff like that. So it actually might be beneficial to lose the first game. In EMEA here, again, we got a bit of an interesting Group A, I think, with Foot, Heretics, Giants, and Karmine Core. Obviously, a kind of revitalized Heretics and Karmine Core have made a lot of changes that they probably needed to do, and that, I think, makes this group kind of interesting, because there's quite a few unknowns in this group. You would expect that Foot and Giants will probably be favored to get out, but it wouldn't shock me if they didn't necessarily either. Group B, not nearly as interesting. On Platchat, we ranked both Koi and BBL as the lowest rated teams, and you've got Navi and Liquid, who should be pretty solid teams, and pretty good, so you'd expect that Navi and Liquid would probably get out of there. And for Fnatic as well, I think they got a pretty good draw. You got the Essentia team and Gentle Mates. Obviously, they got a bit of a rough draw with Vitality, but Vitality aren't playing with their full main roster that they will be because Trex won't be going. Pedestrian is no bad player either, so it's a tough draw for Gentle Mates there to come in here. And again, as I say, you might, as this Ascension team, bit sad in this first tournament, you literally might only play against Vitality if you're Gentle Mates. And then finally, Americas. And Americas, people obviously have been kind of freaking out about because NRG seem to have got a pretty easy run of it. I don't suspect that Fury will be great this year, personally. MIB are in their group as well. And Cloud9 are okay, but NRG should probably, be looking at kind of waltzing through this group without hopefully too much problem. That's probably what they'll be thinking. Group B, though, is the group of death, right? And the reason this has come about, as I said, is Loud were a 1 seed team. They were the 1 seed here. Leviathan were the LCQ runners-up, so they were the 2 seed team. But Sentinels and 100 Thieves were both in the lower pot, I'm going to guess. And so they've just ended up in this kind of, tough group. Let's be real. It's going to be very, very tough for them in general. And again, the way that this is all shaken out, somewhat because, again, Crew are a 2-seed team because they made it to champs, right? So that's why they're over here. And there was a real possibility that we got like Crew and MIBR in here. Like, you know, G2 are probably a decent team and we'll probably be looking at their group thinking they can really get out. But the way that it's kind of worked out with Crew meant that it was probably more likely in Americas than anywhere else that we got a kind of difficult group because of this. Because I think a lot of people are suspicious of Crew, maybe aren't actually that good, but they just happened to go on a magical run there in LCQ, and that's kind of ended up with this, and it's going to be very interesting to see what goes on here in Group B. And one other thing I want to mention is that, of course, all the teams who are getting a bye, they have a big advantage, right? That they have to play one less game to make it. They only have to win one game to make it, you know, to the playoffs, which is very good, right? But EG, funnily enough, have an even bigger advantage than Fnatic and Paper Rex do, because the way that the Americas schedule has worked out, you can see that Crew and G2 play their game here, right? So the opening of Group C, they play on Feb 18th, just there. EG then don't have to play a game until here, Feb 24th, so they get an extra week basically of prep, and they get to, of course, watch this VOD and prep for a full week, not having shown anything of theirs, of course, because the way that America's is. And if you're wondering, no, that's not the case for Paper Rex and Fnatic, because of course they get all the advantages of having a bye and not having to show stuff. But you can see Paper Rex, they play the day after these games are already going on, right? There is no break. For Fnatic, it's the same thing, right? Like, yeah, all these games are going on, but Fnatic play just the day after. They don't get an extra week of prep like EG do. One little complaint I have for EMEA as well, and I don't know if this is a VLR problem or if this will actually happen, but what the hell are they doing? We have 4 games in one day. Why? What? This can't be real, surely. Tell me this is a VLR mistake, because if they are playing 4 games in this day, what on earth are they doing, right? Like, just move this game here. You know, start at 1 p.m. here instead and just do a 3 and a 3. Why are we doing a 2 and a 4? What is going on? Have I lost my mind? Like, how can this possibly ever be the case? And it's EMEA, so you know there will be a tech pause on this day as well. So what, we're gonna do a 16-hour day? What the hell is going on? But now let's move on to some real concerns I have with the kickoff format in general. And when this all first came out, the real focus was on minimum games and how few games there were overall, that I think some of the real issues with the kickoff format kind of got overlooked. But now that we know where all the teams have landed and stuff, I think it becomes pretty clear that there is going to be significant issues with these kickoff tournaments. The first one, as we've kind of seen, is the seeding, right? That we have ended up with a complete group of death here in Americas and a relatively very light easy group as well, because of course we're doing seeding based off what happened last year. But of course, so many of these teams have changed. They are not representative of what happened last year whatsoever, right? So seeding them for this tournament doesn't really make sense if none of the teams really represent, you know, who they were from before, which is where you're basing the seeding off. I also have a pretty big issue with the play-ins as well, that it's probably pretty likely that at least in one of the leagues, we're going to end up in a situation where every team wins one game and loses one game, right? And we all end up 1-1 here in the league, and then I assume that it's going to get based off, you know, map differentials, and then if that's the same, then round differentials. And that is, again, not a great way to determine, like, who is actually the best of those teams, right? Oh, you didn't win, you know, 13-8 and you only won 13-9 instead. Sorry, guess that means you're out of the tournament. Like, that is a real possibility that could happen. And that is obviously not going to feel like a great way to go out, because you just so happen to have lost one round more than your opponent. And we have problems in the playoffs as well. Now, this graphic is wrong, by the way. It's not Group A plays the play-in winner. That's not how it works at all. Let's say that you are Group A1 and the team that, you know, wins the play-in is Group A2. What that means is that you basically just won't play the team if they were from your group, right? But other than that, you could play against anyone. So in a kind of weird way, you're kind of rooting against the team. If you are the team that wins your group, you kind of don't want this team to win the play-ins, because that means that you have a chance then to play the second place team instead, rather than a first place team. But what that means is that we could just randomly get, you know, the clear best 2 teams just play each other here, right? Because it's based off whoever wins this, right? Which has obviously nothing to do with who the actual best 2 teams are. So it's very likely that, again, at least in one of the leagues, if not multiple of them, that we get the actual 2 best teams. If we ran this tournament 100 times and who came out, those teams who are actually the two best teams won't be going to Masters Madrid. Only one of them will, and instead we'll get a third or fourth best team going in their place. And of course, because it's single elim, that means that these games are more random, right? If you have one bad day on that day, you're gone, you know, even if you're a Fnatic or a Paper Rex or something like that. Now, of course, you would still expect those very best teams to qualify, but maybe one of them does have a bad day and loses in a single elim game, and that's it, they're gone. Now, to be fair, I am a bit of a believer in single elim. I personally like single elim. Maybe it's because I'm, you know, from a more sports background where, you know, pretty much most things are single elim in traditional sports. But still, I do like them. However, I don't really love single elim for qualifying for tournaments because I want to see the best teams at the international tournament. So I do want to see who the actual best teams are. Single elim, of course, is good for giving somewhat surprise results, which I think is good in, you know, once we get to who those best teams are. I think it's kind of cool to see, like, oh, you know, a big upset happened and single elim makes that more likely to happen. I think that's cool. But when we're actually talking about qualifying for those events, you know, I don't need like the third and fourth best team from every region qualifying for an international event because it just will feel like, you know, that shouldn't really be the case. And so some of you are probably asking, though, yeah, but what would you do different? How would you do it different? Don't just point out all these problems. What's the actual solution? Well, my solution would be pretty simple. Don't do a kickoff tournament like this, right? Just have stage one, where it's, you know, the league stage. Have that before the first Masters. Have the second stage before the second Masters. And then do a kind of big LCQ tournament if you want to, before Champs to see who qualifies for Champs. I think that makes a lot more sense because then you actually could do seeding, right? Because you know the results of the team from the year, what they've already played. Right? You know what's going on. So seeding would be very easy to do, you know, and you could probably make a tournament that makes a lot more sense knowing, you know, relatively where the teams are. Personally, I think that just makes a lot more sense to do. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Have a nice day, everyone. Have a really nice day. A suspiciously nice day. And goodbye.